So what is the tax problem everyone is talking about with MicroStrategy? I just woke up and I had to make this video, and I'm going to try to give you a very unbiased breakdown of this. Now, obviously, if you guys have watched any of my content, you know that I'm not a fan of MicroStrategy. I think it's overhyped and overvalued. I do have to say, in the way that things are playing out, I'm going to talk about the good and talk about the bad as if I don't dislike MicroStrategy. Okay. So the first thing that you need to understand is that MicroStrategy could be facing a multi-billion-dollar tax bill, and this is supposed to happen in 2026. But supposedly it was under the Corporate Alternative Minimum Tax Introduction of Inflation Reduction Act in 2022. So in my opinion, if I run a publicly traded company and if it's as big, almost at $100 billion market cap like MicroStrategy, this should have been something that I should have prepared for. I mean, that's kind of a huge red flag within itself, is that, again, being unbiased, like, how does he not have a team that's somewhat prepared for this? Because you're going to hear what the tax implication is. MicroStrategy could be taxed up to 15% on those gains starting 2026. So unlike traditional capital gain taxes, which apply when assets are sold, the new rule requires companies to account for their fair market value, certain holdings, and their gaps. So that's pretty much what they talked about of being able to tax unrealized gains. I don't support this. I don't care if it's MicroStrategy. I don't care if it's Apple. But supposedly this rule includes Bitcoin. And under this new financial rule, as a result, because of what's going on, it could rise up to $12.8 billion with a deferred tax liability that can increase up to $4 billion. Up to $4 billion is what MicroStrategy would have to pay. I don't think it makes sense that, again, I don't like MicroStrategy. You guys know that all of my videos, I do believe it's overhyped up and overvalued. I can still call bullshit when I see bullshit, right? And I do not agree with a $4 billion tax liability on a company that has not actually gone forward to liquidate those shares, because it does put this company in an unfortunate position. But again, this isn't supposed to happen until 2026. It's getting talked about now, which again is just so odd because, first off, is it going to actually continue to move forward, or is Trump just going to remove that altogether, right? As he wants to be able to raise tariffs and possibly get rid of the IRS. We'll see if that even happens by 2026. With that being said, MicroStrategy is lobbying the IRS to exempt like similar firms of Berkshire Hathaway to receive their security holdings. If denied, the company may have to sell some of their Bitcoin, and this is why MSTR was so aggressively selling off into Friday's close. So because they will most likely have to sell some Bitcoin to cover their tax bill. Because again, Michael Saylor, which again, I'm not a fan of, has pledged not to sell Bitcoin anytime soon. But when you look at the actual company within itself, if you look at MicroStrategy, right, and you see that it's trading at an $88.2 billion market cap, if you look at their actual financials, right, we can go ahead and refresh it here. If you look at their actual financials and what they produce in revenue, what they carry in cash, they would not have enough to cover a $4 billion tax bill. And this is the really unfortunate position that MicroStrategy is putting themselves in. If I ran a company that big and knowing that this thing was possibly being put into effect, it should have been something that should have been talked about or, get ahead of, rather than it go against you. Because now he's put in a very kind of like unfortunate position. Again, I do not agree with this tax bill. I do not believe that if you do not liquidate a position, if you do not sell that position, that you should be taxed. Imagine this, right? I like to give kind of more of a real world example because people like you and I wouldn't necessarily experience this kind of tax. Normally, this tax is for individuals, at least it's set for individuals with over a $100 million either net worth or income, right? That being said, I'm not there. I don't know if you are, most likely not. But the same type of tax, imagine if that was put in like our properties, right? A lot of us own homes, and if our property increases in value by $100,000, we didn't sell the property. So we don't have those $100,000 realized. I don't have access to it. Now, technically, I can borrow against it, just as I'm sure he borrows against his obviously not just his Bitcoin, but borrows against his shares and his market cap and all that stuff. Nonetheless, you don't tax debt because debt is not taxable. This new plan is supposed to kind of get around that, where, hey, in their position for MicroStrategy is, we made $18 billion, we're going to tax you 15%, but we haven't sold it. And what happens if, next year or 2025, he loses 5 billion? Does he get a part of that back? That's the part that I just did not understand. I do not agree with. And again, like, regardless of my own personal bias with MicroStrategy, I like sharing this information because, I think it's useful for a trader to understand of what a company is going through. But I think it's also important to have, a level-headed approach of, hey, this doesn't seem fair, right? All these other companies do not get taxed on unrealized gains, but this one will. Again, it just puts it in a tough spot, especially when he said that he had no intention of selling. Now, again, could this be kind of the domino effect of now he's going to have to sell billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, which can create even more selling pressure, more uncertainty. And then, of course, with what he has planned for 2025 and 2026, diluting investors even more to possibly buy even more Bitcoin. So nonetheless, I wanted to break this down. What exactly is this tax implication? Pretty much MicroStrategy and Michael Saylor are going to get taxed up to $4 billion because of their unrealized gain of $18 billion. This isn't set to take place until 2026. We'll see if any changes are actually made before he actually has to begin to liquidate some of those Bitcoins to be able to have enough money in his reserves to be able to cover that tax liability. So we'll see how things play out. I just wanted to make sure that I kept you guys up to date. And again, even if you end up not liking me because you know that I'm not a big fan of MicroStrategy, I hope that you can understand my level-headed approach of, if I'm not a fan of something, I don't care if I'm originally against it, whatever it is that's going on, I'm always open to calling BS when I see it. So I appreciate your time. I hope that earned a thumbs up. I hope you have an amazing weekend. And if you want to watch me trade live as soon as Monday, it's the second link in the description down below. I trade live every single day at market open for about 30 minutes to an hour. If you ever want to tune in, second link in the description down below. We'd love to see you there. Like always, let's make sure that we end the year on a green note. Take care, team.